Hey, we're here at World War Brick with my man Paul with one of the coolest, most amazing, exciting mocks I've ever seen. So let's get right into it. The Battle of Rorke's Drift, 1879. Paul, you've knocked it out of the park with this thing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about some of the highlights.
Okay. So yeah, this is the Battle of Rorke's Drift. It was a 12-hour engagement, roughly, the 22nd to the 23rd of January, 1879. Fought between British and colonial troops and warriors from the Zulu Kingdom in South Africa. It was actually fought in the British colony of Natal, which is what it was called at the time, on the border of Zululand. So, little preface to the battle: the British lost the Battle of Isandlwana that morning, and the victorious Zulus pressed on into Natal. They were aware of this outpost here at Rorke's Drift. It was originally owned by the trader Jim Rorke, so they had traded with him, so they knew it was there. They knew the British were garrisoning it, and they knew they had food and ammunition for the invasion, so they decided to come onto it. The outpost was defended by 156 British and colonial troops, about 39 of whom were patients in the hospital. This was originally Jim Rorke's house, converted to a field hospital to accommodate sick and injured British soldiers in the invasion. And then a storehouse where they had their food and ammunition, again as provisions for the invasion. The British got about 2 to 3 hours of advance warning that the Zulus were coming by Lieutenant Adendorf, who's actually fighting inside who actually stayed and fought. He's the only man to have fought in both battles, Isandlwana and at Rorke's Drift. But he warned them they were coming. The British emptied the storehouse, and they took all their cornmeal bags, their mealie bags as they called them. They piled them around the outpost, created a perimeter, and then they divided that with biscuit boxes. So basically boxes of crackers as a second fallback position of defense should one of the buildings fall. So the original plan was that they could form up on either side of the box, the biscuit box barricade, depending on which building the Zulu attacked or focused on. The first Zulu attack actually came from the south. You can see the results of that here in the build. These are all younger Zulu warriors, as you can see by the lack of the head ring and the dark tan shields. Your head rings and white shields were for older married Zulu men. So that's who carried on the second half. There's second and third attacks. There were actually 4 bodies of Zulu fighting men there. They were referred to as impis. The first being younger men in their 20s, unmarried, that you see back there. And then the later arriving older men in their 30s and 40s that carried out the second 2 attacks. This is about 7:30 p.m. During the second attack. You can see the Zulus kind of sweeping around from the south and coming around to the north end of the station, which is what they did. They broke into the hospital, started pulling out the defenders, which you can see Private Joseph Williams on either side. And that's how they got into the hospital. They threw a couple fiery spears up there, set it ablaze, and ended up driving the British out of the hospital. I could take the roof off of here so we could see the detail on the inside, which I'm particularly proud of. I have this mapped out. I used the Rorke's Drift campaign book to map out the design of the hospital, the interior rooms, kind of where everybody was at. And then I have the locations of British patients that didn't make out of the hospital based on documentation after the battle as to where they are. One little detail in there you'll note is the colonial tribesman there that was actually fighting for the British. He's noted by the red bandana that he's got on. They had him wear red scarves so that in battle they could identify both with the red coats and that they were on their side. And then you have, I did a really deep dive into the history of this battle. So, a lot of these guys are built around having names, faces, stories from the men that were there. So you have Private Adams in here, Private Horrigan in the middle room here, Private Hayden kind of in this front area here, and then Sergeant Maxfield over here. And then you have six of your 11 Victoria Cross winners for evacuating the hospital. You have Private Hook, Henry Hook, Private Robert Jones, Private William Jones, Private John Williams. you have Corporal William Wilson Allen and Private Fred Hitch. They were all Victoria Cross winners from the battle for evacuating the hospital. You also had 5 more Victoria Cross winners are represented here. That's Lieutenant Chard, Lieutenant Brumhead, Surgeon Reynolds, James Reynolds, Assistant Commissariat James Dalton, and Corporal Ferdinand Schiess over here clearing out Zulus from next to the wall. I have, again, I have all 156 British and colonial troops represented in the battle. About 161 Zulus. Yeah, go for it.
Didn't have quite room for the 3,000 or 4,000 Zulus.
I didn't have enough room for the 3,000 or 4,000 Zulus. No, I think the 161 worked out to be a pretty good balance for the build.
Yeah.
Because it has a nice impression that it's doing what it's supposed to. They're kind of coming on. They're moving, where they're supposed to be. And to me, the British actually looked like they're being pressed a bit. So, yeah.
What struck me the most about this build was the historical accuracy and the painstaking detail that you incorporated into the build. Like you have 156 British minifigures because there's 156 British there. The scale this is basically the scale. Right?
It's close. It's close. I may have overestimated a little bit because a minifigure I estimated to be about 6 feet tall in regular life, but the average British soldier was only 5'3".
Right.
So I might be a little bit on the big side, but it's not that far off.
No.
And the hospital building is built very proportionally to what I got out of the campaign book, and same with the storehouse. I actually did the storehouse first, and my build kind of moved this way towards the hospital. So you can kind of see like where my technique for the mealie bag wall changed here. I have kind of a straight line along the studs, and then it just kind of hooks there. That was my first attempt at like making it curve a little bit, and then when I got more comfortable doing it was when I did the north wall here and kind of tiled it all the way across except for where a stud lined up, and that just kind of holds it in place pretty nicely. There's a couple of flat spots that naturally occurred, but the rest of it I was able to kind of angle and then turn back towards the hospital, which I was actually very happy with how it turned out.
So basically, one of my favorite movies of all time is, of course, the 1964 movie Zulu, which stars Michael Caine, I think, in his first role. And
yep.
Steve, who was the...
Stanley
Baker.
Stanley Baker, yep. Stanley Baker. Was
Thinking
Lieutenant
back
Chard.
on the movie was actually pretty accurate.
It was close. Yep, it was close. This battle was very very publicized because actually because of the British defeat at Isandlwana, they needed something to kind of grab on to regain that national pride. The British Empire hadn't really ever lost so badly as they did at Isandlwana to a
worst defeat to a native contingent they've ever suffered.
Absolutely, they lost around 1,800 men, lots of supplies, and a lot of pride. And this kind of restored that. The unfortunate thing is kind of the result of the courage of both sides here in the battle, because when the British won this battle, a lot of the British superiors, Lord Chelmsford first, and then Sir Garnet Wolseley, who took over for Chelmsford, both kind of downplayed the men that sacrificed here and that held out here. Garnet Wolseley kind of compared him to rats fighting in a hole, and it really downplayed it. In fact, when Lieutenant Brumhead, he was promoted, awarded Victoria Cross, promoted to captain and brevet major, they really didn't want to do that, but the Queen did it. So they didn't think a whole lot of it. He was considered a hopeless officer by his superiors, but in accounts after he passed away, there was a World Journal article that kind of was pretty scathing and hammered on him pretty good, and his men came to his defense and wrote letters to the press and kind of refuted everything very publicly, talking about how much they liked serving under him and how good he was to them and tactically. And Lieutenant Chard, same thing. He was called notoriously relaxed He didn't have that pomp and flair that most British officers like to carry with them, and they didn't really like that. These were two guys that didn't really fit the mold. Actually, Lieutenant Chard hadn't seen combat before Rorke's Drift. And then on the Zulu side, crossing the Buffalo River and attacking Rorke's Drift was directly against the King's orders, King Ketchewayo's orders, his brother being, I can't pronounce that, Dabulamanzi Kampande. I got to read it. King Dabulamanzi Kampande, the prince, he was the king's half-brother, and he was known for being very aggressive, very rash, and decided he was going to go take the food stores and the ammunition from the British. And didn't work out too well. And then when he got back, because he had defied the king's orders, and he and his troops got back, they were actually mocked by their own people and kind of looked down on for defying orders, going to Rorke's Drift, and then getting beaten. They were a lot of them were told they probably should have just stayed there, and it's kind of a bummer because to me, reading the history about it, because both sides of this battle, I mean, the Zulus facing the volleys and the entrenched British, I mean, just a few guys, but fighting in square with fortifications, and they're assaulting with mostly the Assagai spears and the Nguni shields, cowhide shields. They're not going to stop bullets. Interesting thing about the Zulus too is they had firearms, they had traded for firearms, but they really didn't like them. They thought they were cowards' weapons, and they preferred and they mastered fighting with their shields and spears. They fought in what's called the horns of the buffalo.
Right.
So you'd have the buffalo's chest, the main body of troops, and then they do an encircling maneuver with the horns to encircle. That's how they beat the British at Isandlwana, because they fought in the thin red line at Isandlwana and were encircled and wiped out.
Well, I'm paying your mock the highest compliment when I say this, but I look at this and I want to go to Rorke's Drift and the Tile Province so badly. And from what I understand, it's still pretty remote. Still a little wild. You don't go out after night. And it's on both our bucket lists.
It's on both our bucket lists for sure. For sure.
Jasper, do you have any questions?
It's up there.
I don't think so.
Paul, do you have like a YouTube channel? Do you have a social presence where if people are interested, they can follow you?
I have like a personal Instagram. This is kind of my first endeavor into mock building, and this is my first convention. So I don't really right now. My Instagram is at PMRank, so you can kind of see the progress I've built on here, but you'll also see a little bit of my kids and stuff that I cook. So it's not purely Lego.
Oh, cool. Well, I look forward to further builds.
But I always got stuff rolling around in my head and what to do. This is just the most coherent it's come out. So
are you thinking of expanding the Zulu Wars or the Boer Wars or anything like that?
So I can't bring myself to take this totally apart, so I'll probably keep tweaking this here and there. But I've also I really like to do something with like Gallipoli, or I was actually thinking of like the British defense of Hougoumont during the Battle of Waterloo. Something there. The kind of advantage here is that with my OCD mind, I could encompass the entire battlefield. And there's not a lot of times you see that and are able to do that in a Lego mock, because I could get the entirety of the Battle of Rorke's Drift, obviously minus about 40 or 3,800 Zulu warriors.
Hey,
but
don't put limitations on yourself.
Right. But I could get the entirety of the battlefield in here, and that's, I think, what also makes it a really cool and unique build.
Yeah, get the river and the bridge. And you can do it. Well, really appreciate your time.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm cutting into your eating time.
Don't worry about it. Like I said, my big thing was to be able to come out here and share with people who would really enjoy seeing it. So,
these two kids here, I can tell you for sure enjoyed.
I'm super glad I could oblige.
And for a first-time mock, that's awesome, man. You killed it.
No worries.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you.